You won't believe how a tiny, fragile baby duckling changed a little boy's life forever. This isn't just an animal friendship story, it's about how one unexpected bond brought light to the darkest of fears. What started as a simple duckling rescue turned into an unbreakable connection that no one saw coming. Because sometimes the smallest creatures can have the biggest impact on our hearts. This is the story of Ethan, a boy afraid of the dark, and Pip, the baby duckling whose friendship would melt hearts around the world. Meet Ethan, a bright, curious 7-year-old with an imagination as big as the sky. But beneath his adventurous spirit, Ethan carried a fear that haunted him every night. He was terrified of the dark. For Ethan, bedtime wasn't a peaceful routine. It was a battle against shadows that seemed to creep across his walls, turning ordinary shapes into monsters. His parents tried everything: nightlights, comforting words, even staying by his side until he fell asleep. But nothing eased the fear that gripped his heart when the lights went out. The dark wasn't just dark for Ethan. It felt alive, filled with whispers his mind invented and shadows that stretched longer than they should. Every creak of the house felt like footsteps. Every flicker of light from outside seemed like something watching him. His heart would race, tiny hands clutching the covers like a shield. His parents worried. They read books about overcoming fear, tried breathing exercises, and even created bravery charts. But nothing stuck. Ethan felt trapped in a cycle of fear, convinced he'd never be able to sleep without a fortress of nightlights. But little did they know, the answer wasn't in any book or parenting guide. It wasn't a gadget, a routine, or even their comforting hugs. The answer was about to waddle unexpectedly into Ethan's life, wrapped in yellow fluff with tiny webbed feet and the softest peep you've ever heard. A baby duckling named Pip. One rainy afternoon, everything changed. Ethan and his mom were walking near a local park when they heard it. A faint, high-pitched peeping sound, barely audible over the drizzle. Curious, Ethan followed the sound, his heart racing with a mix of excitement and concern. There, huddled under a bush, was the tiniest baby duckling Ethan had ever seen. Soaked from the rain, trembling and alone. No mother in sight, no other ducks nearby. Just a fragile, shivering creature looking as scared as Ethan often felt at night. Without hesitation, Ethan gently cupped the little duckling in his hands. Pip's soft feathers were damp, his tiny body barely bigger than Ethan's palm, but his heartbeat was strong. A faint, rapid thump-thump that Ethan could feel against his skin. Somehow, in that fragile connection, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Courage. They brought Pip home, wrapped him in a towel, and made a cozy little bed from an old shoebox and soft blankets. Ethan named him Pip because of the soft, cheerful peeping sounds he made, like tiny chirps of hope cutting through the silence. But something unexpected happened that night. For the first time in weeks, Ethan didn't beg his mom to stay until he fell asleep. He didn't stack nightlights like little beacons against the dark. Instead, he curled up beside Pip's box, watching over him as he drifted into peaceful sleep. Maybe it was Pip's gentle breathing, or the fact that someone smaller and more vulnerable needed Ethan's protection. But in that quiet moment, something shifted. The darkness was still there, but Ethan wasn't afraid anymore. He wasn't focused on the dark. He was focused on keeping Pip safe. As days turned into weeks, Ethan and Pip became inseparable. Wherever Ethan went, Pip was right behind. Tiny webbed feet slapping softly on the floor, fluffy wings flapping awkwardly as he tried to keep up. They shared everything. Ethan read books aloud, his voice animated, while Pip listened intently, tilting his little head as if he understood every word. They played in the backyard, chasing bubbles and tiny shadows, with Pip peeping joyfully at every new discovery. Their laughter and tiny quacks filled the house like music stitched into the walls. But it was at night when their bond shined the brightest. The darkness no longer felt like an enemy. It was just part of the day, a backdrop to Ethan's newfound courage. No more nightlights, no more fearful tears. Instead, Ethan would fall asleep with Pip nestled under his arm, the warmth of his tiny friend replacing the fear that used to live there. Pip didn't need to do anything extraordinary. He just needed to be there, to trust Ethan, to rely on him. And in that simple act of being needed, Ethan found his strength. He wasn't afraid of the dark because Pip wasn't afraid. He wasn't afraid because he had someone to protect. It wasn't just that Ethan had saved Pip. Pip had saved Ethan right back. Their friendship wasn't built on grand gestures, but on the quiet, simple moments. The kind that melt your heart and remind you that even the smallest creatures can leave the biggest impact. One evening, as a storm rolled in, the house was suddenly plunged into darkness. The power flickered once, then went out completely, leaving Ethan's room bathed in shadows. No nightlights, no comforting glow from the hallway, just the deep, overwhelming blackness. In the past, this would have been Ethan's worst nightmare, the kind of darkness that made his heart race and his mind fill with imaginary monsters hiding in corners. His parents braced themselves, expecting cries for help, the familiar rush of fear. But instead, silence. Ethan didn't scream, he didn't cry, he simply reached for Pip, his tiny baby duckling friend nestled beside him. Wrapping his small arms around Pip's soft, warm body, Ethan whispered softly, "It's okay, Pip. I've got you." It was such a simple moment, but it carried the weight of transformation. The boy who once feared the dark was now offering comfort in the very place that used to terrify him. He wasn't afraid, not because the darkness had changed, but because he had. Holding Pip gave him a purpose bigger than his fear. The darkness wasn't an enemy anymore. It was just a backdrop to a story of courage. His parents stood quietly in the doorway, hearts full, watching their son comfort the little creature that had unknowingly helped him heal. The same shadows that once haunted Ethan were still there, but now they were just part of the room, no more powerful than the walls or the floor. Fear doesn't vanish when the lights come on. It fades when we find something, or someone, worth being brave for. Pip didn't just help Ethan face his fear, he helped him transform it. The dark didn't disappear, but it lost its grip on Ethan's heart. And sometimes that's all it takes to overcome fear. Not fighting it alone, but having a reason to be strong even when it's hard. After that night, Ethan's fear of the dark felt like a distant memory. But his story with Pip was far from over. As Pip grew, so did Ethan, not just in age, but in confidence, curiosity, and compassion. They were inseparable. Mornings started with Pip waddling onto Ethan's bed, gently pecking at his blanket to wake him up. They'd share breakfast, Ethan with his cereal, Pip with his tiny bowl of duckling feed, the two of them side by side as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Their days were filled with adventure. Ethan would build tiny obstacle courses for Pip in the backyard, cheering as the little duckling navigated tunnels made from cardboard tubes and mini ramps. Pip followed Ethan like a shadow, his soft peeps blending with Ethan's laughter, a soundtrack of friendship. But it wasn't just fun and games. Pip taught Ethan patience, responsibility, and the beauty of caring for another life. Ethan learned how to recognize Pip's moods, the happy flutters of his wings, the curious tilt of his head, the gentle nibbles when he wanted attention. And Pip, in return, gave Ethan unconditional trust. There was no judgment, no expectation, just pure, simple animal friendship. That bond filled spaces in Ethan's heart that fear used to occupy. He wasn't just a boy who had overcome his fear of the dark. He was a boy who had grown into a protector, a friend, and a source of comfort for someone else. Together, they weren't just surviving, they were thriving. As time passed, Pip grew from a tiny, fragile baby duckling into a strong, beautiful duck. His soft yellow fluff turned into sleek white feathers, and his curious peeps evolved into confident quacks. Ethan loved watching Pip grow, but with each new feather, an undeniable truth settled in. Pip was a wild animal, meant to live freely, not in a bedroom or backyard. The decision to let Pip go wasn't easy. Ethan's heart ached at the thought of saying goodbye. Pip wasn't just a pet. He was family. A friend who had held Ethan's hand through the darkest parts of his childhood, teaching him courage without even knowing it. But true love isn't about holding on. It's about letting go when it's time. And for Pip, it was time. On the day of Pip's release, Ethan and his parents took him to a beautiful nature reserve, a place where ponds stretched wide under the open sky. Ethan knelt beside Pip one last time, his hand resting gently on Pip's feathers. "You're ready," he whispered, tears filling his eyes but a proud smile on his face. Pip hesitated for just a moment, as if sensing the weight of the goodbye. Then, with one final look, filled with trust and gratitude, he waddled toward the water. Ethan watched as Pip paddled out into the wide, open pond, his heart breaking and healing all at once. Pip was free, but the space he left behind wasn't empty. It was filled with memories, lessons, and a bond that would never fade. Ethan and Pip's story isn't just about a boy and a baby duckling. It's about growth, courage, and the unexpected ways that love finds us when we need it most. If this story melted your heart, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who needs a little hope today. Your support helps us tell more stories like Ethan and Pip's, and reminds us that even the smallest friendships can make the biggest difference. Because sometimes the ones we rescue end up rescuing us right back.